Today I have the honor of sitting down with an Oklahoman that you've probably heard of. If you've ever watched television or listened to the radio or driven a car around Oklahoma City, you've probably run across Noble McIntyre. He advertises more than just about anybody in the marketplace and is a tremendous advocate for athletics at the University of Oklahoma, a huge Oklahoma City Thunder fan, and just a regular red-blooded Okie. But what you may not know is the background of why he is who he is, how he got to where he is, and everything that makes him such a unique persona is really multiplied in who he is as a person. I'm excited to show you a little bit of a peek behind the curtain in the life of Noble McIntyre beyond the courtroom, and I hope you enjoy today's segment. Noble McIntyre, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, glad you're here. How are you?
I'm good. I mean, Thunder's happening right now. My wife's a huge Thunder fan, so we've been going to all the games. I've got some buddies that we share tickets with, and they take each other. My wife's like, "You're not leaving me." So we got floor tickets the other night. I had to buy 2 because she wasn't going to let me stay at home. But I've enjoyed the Thunder run, and I hope it goes well, and we continue the run we're on.
Big game tonight,
Yep.
obviously. We'll see. I don't know when this will actually be seen by everyone, but the Thunder are going for a trip to the conference championship tonight in Denver. So.
I hope they get it done because heart of my heart the other night. Listen, being at that game, being that nervous, my resting heart rate was 121. It's normally 60. So it was one of those games, but it's just a lot of fun. I enjoyed it a lot.
How is your heart?
I had my 9-month checkup the other day. The quadruple this last Tuesday was the 1-year anniversary of when I went down at my office. It was 2 days after my daughter's wedding, and I had no idea I had a heart problem because there's no family history of it, and I don't have any of the bad habits that would suggest that you would. I'm not overweight. I'm not a big drinker. I'm not a smoker. So it was a shock to everybody when I had that happen a year ago, and then had the quadruple bypass surgery. Recently had my follow-up. Things are looking well. They want to work on my sleep a little bit because I only sleep about 4 to 5 hours a night. But as far as everything else, it looks like that Widowmaker, I dodged a bullet, and I'm doing really, really well.
I've known a lot of people that work really hard, and I've known a lot of people that run really fast.
Right.
I've never met another Noble McIntyre.
Well, so my doctor sent me to a sleep study because I told him, I only get about 4 to 5 hours a night sleep, and I've done it for 20 years. His response was, everybody says that. They think they only slept that much, but you got more than that. So I went and got one of those little Oura rings that tracks your sleep. So I went in to see him, and I showed him over a 7-day period of time. I never had more than 4.5 hours of sleep. I had 3 hours and 22 minutes with 10 minutes of REM, 3 hours and 57 minutes, 4 hours and 12 minutes. And so it really was what I said, somewhere between 3 to 4.5 hours of sleep, where I will go to bed at midnight. I'm still laying awake until 1 or 2 because my mind never shuts off. And then I'm getting up at 5 or 5:30. And he said, well, what are you thinking about? Everything. I mean, my mind never stops running, just hard, and I'm always in the middle. Just this morning, 5 different radio interviews, one in Norman for the last an hour. Here now, we're doing this, and I have meetings in the office, and it's just go, 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 and that's how I've always been.
Were you that way as a kid? You say 20 years your sleep schedule has been this way. That's the way I've always been. I mean, is that the way you've always been, or where did that come from?
Yeah, I'm the only one played every sport my school had because I wanted something to do. It was obviously before the internet and before cable television, and so I needed to be something to do. I owned my first business at 14. I had a bank loan that my dad co-signed so I could own some equipment. Had employees working for me then, so I was already motivated to do more than just schoolwork, to go own a company, and did really well. McIntyre Asphalt Repairs, that was the name of the company. Had a bank note and everything. Had a loan. I had a loan payment I had to make every month as a 14-year-old, if you can imagine. And just always have tried to make sure I was taking available of all my time. And so even when I had my heart surgery and I was home, the average person goes back to work in 10 to 12 weeks following open heart surgery. I went back to work on day 14. And in those 14 days that I was home, I watch almost no television unless it's a sporting event. So I wasn't sitting there binge watching TV shows. I was catching up on cases, reading what's happening in the world, trying to be, apprised of everything versus just binge watching TV. It's just because I want something to do. And so it's just go. My dad has said my whole life, and people won't understand this because in the old days they had alarm clocks. You didn't have these phones, and you have to wind them. And he said you'd have a clock that was a day clock, a 5-day clock, but they had 10-day clocks. You'd wind it, and it would last 10 days before you have to wind it again. And my dad used to say that I was wound tighter than a 10-day clock because he said you just wound up.
Was that modeled for you anywhere?
My dad was a hard worker. Yeah, I mean, he was always on the road. He was a salesman. He could be gone, a couple weeks at a time, and my mom would be home raising myself and my 3 sisters and my brother. And Dad would check in at night. Again, pre-cell phones. You'd have to call from a payphone. He was always working and always doing something. And when I came home, a lot of kids on weekends growing up would sleep in. My dad, I didn't sleep in. He'd come wake me up at 7 a.m. on a Saturday in the summertime and say, get up and go outside, go mow the grass, go clean the garage, go find something to do, go create a job. And so he had high-level expectations. So I just never was the kid that got to stay and sleep in till 10 or 11 on a Saturday. We were always up doing something. And then as I got older, I was born in Fargo, North Dakota. We moved to Oklahoma when I was a year old. But all of my relatives were from Fargo, and my grandparents had a farm. And so right when school was over, we would go to North Dakota for the whole summer. It'd be 2.5 months, and I worked on the farm. And if you've ever worked on a farm, you get up before the sun comes up. You're not sitting around. And so that's just what it's always been for me, is just get up and go, get up and work. When I was in college at Oklahoma Baptist University, at the end of my first year, I went on wheat harvest. And that's when you leave school and you start in South Texas and you work your way all the way up through Oklahoma into Colorado, and you're following and it's a custom cutting company, and you'll go from farm to farm to farm. And I could have driven the combines, or I could have driven the semis. Well, the semi drivers were paid more money than the combine drivers. So I went and got my CDL license at the end of my freshman year of college so that I could legally drive semis. And so I drove semis all summer long, grain trucks, the great big semi trucks pulling grain back into town and dump them and come back out. So it's crazy that helps me now, because I'm a personal injury trial lawyer and we do semi cases, and I will depose semi drivers, and I was one. And so that background helps me even today in my career. I would drive the combines, I would drive the trucks, I would drive whatever my grandfather told me to drive. And it would be from sunup till dark, and often after dark. And my grandmother would bring, she'd bring out breakfast, she'd bring out lunch, and you would eat on the go. You'd be eating in the combine, in the truck. It was just work.
That's awesome. You've never lost your roots of Burns
Right.
Flat. And it's so funny to me to really get to know Noble, and also to get to see Noble, because you swing a big bat. You've got a great brand. I joke with people, it's almost like Beyonce. When you hear Beyonce, nobody needs to know the last name.
Right.
When I say Noble McIntyre, it almost is one word, because the brand itself is so strong. And we're in a major metropolitan area. But I know that's not exactly how you started and where you come from, and you've never really lost sight of that. What was it like growing up in Burns Flat for you?
It was very different than I think most people's childhood in this sense. We moved from Fargo, North Dakota to Burns Flat in March of 1971. I was 13 months old. In the 70s, you had in this country an economic downturn and a recession. In the Jimmy Carter era, you had double-digit inflation and double-digit interest rates. People talk about interest rates at 7% today for a home. Back then, they were 16%. And so there was very little happening anywhere in the country, and certainly not in western Oklahoma. The reason we moved to western Oklahoma was my dad was a salesman for a company based in Fargo. He was one of the founders of the company called Steiger Tractor. And his territory was Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, and Kansas. And he had his own little airplane. I say an airplane, people, oh, your dad had an airplane. It was a little Cessna 210, 6-seater. And on Mondays, he would fly down, and he would fly into these little towns, and there'd be a little airport. He'd see his salesman. He'd just go town to town to town, and on Fridays, he would fly home. One day, he was flying over western Oklahoma, and it was Clinton Sherman Air Force Base, a town called Burns Flat, but it was the Clinton Sherman Air Force Base. And they had just closed it because they were going through base realignment. And he said the runway was the biggest he'd ever seen. And at the time, it was the third longest runway in the world, the alternate landing site for the space shuttle in case they had problems. And he said he just had to land on it. He'd never seen a runway that big. He said you could literally land, take off, land, take off, land, take off before you reach the end of the runway. You could do it 3 times. It was a 3-mile-long runway. And so he landed on it, and they detained him temporarily for landing on an active military base. But it was a skeleton crew in the process of closing down the base. And they thought it was funny that he landed, and they gave him a ride around town in a Jeep, and said, all these homes are going to be for sale. There's 1,800 homes. There's nobody living here. And so he flew home and told my mother, because it was right in the center of his territory, who didn't even know we were moving. We're moving to a town called Burns Flat, Oklahoma, western Oklahoma, because we bought the base commander's house where they had the base commander. Now, and if you've ever been to Tinker, all of the homes for the enlisted look exactly the same. Officer Row is 1 or 2 streets, and they're, instead of being a duplex, it's a standalone home, but they're not all that much different, and all those homes look the same. The base commander's home had a bigger yard. And we were the first family to move in 1971 into the base commander's home because my dad could park his airplane a mile down the road at this great big runway with this great big hangar. It was the only plane in the hangar. And so from 71 to 81, they would sell 1 or 2 houses a month, maybe, and it filled in at Officer Row. All the rest of the houses didn't sell, though, because, again, there's nothing going on. But the military didn't want people breaking into it, so they still maintained a gate around the entire town, just like Tinker. And they mowed all the grass, and all the homes were unlocked because they didn't want kids breaking in, but there were very few people living there. And so from 3 or 4, when I could walk and ride bikes, until I was 11, I could ride my skateboard and my bike street after street after street, all empty, maintained lawns, all empty. And then in 81, the oil boom hit, and it filled up overnight. And so my childhood until I was 11 was a handful of friends that lived in a handful of houses, and we did everything together. And the parents let us do whatever we want because there was a gate around town. You couldn't go anywhere, and there wasn't anybody to get into trouble with except your friends, and until I turned 11, and it filled up overnight. So it was a very unusual child upbringing in that regard, and that I lived in a ghost town. I went through school from kindergarten to 12th grade with the same group of kids because, again, they were all farm kids. And their parents had grown up, and their parents had grown up. So, Manuel Castro, I can go through the names, Steve Gibhart, some of those kids out there where we grew up together. And I think that they knew Noble before the public Noble. And so it's like my daughters. We'll walk into a restaurant and there will be people recognize me because of my public image here. And sometimes I'll come up and talk to them, and sometimes they won't. But I'll get looked at a lot. And my daughters see that. And my youngest daughter will look at me and say, if they just knew you were weird. They just knew you were weird. Dad, you held me down yesterday and you bit me on the end of the nose. You're strange. But they don't see that side. Well, my friends from Burns Flat knew Noble before Noble McIntyre. And so they get a kick out of it because they'll send me a text or an email and say, dude, you're everywhere. You're on TV. You're on a bus. You're on a helicopter. You're everywhere. But you're just Noble, who's out there throwing firecrackers at anthills with the rest of us, getting into trouble with the rest of us. I mean, I to this day, my mother hates it when I tell this. I'm the only kid that I'm aware of in the history of Burns Flat Public Schools, and we called them licks back then, not getting paddled, that got licks every year in kindergarten through 12th grade. I was in trouble all the time for being ornery, but at the same time, I was the valedictorian in junior high and high school. I was the smartest kid in the class, so I was this well-rounded kid that was disciplined at home, but was rambunctious, and you'd get in trouble for stuff like chewing gum back then. And so they'd say, no, you were always in trouble for something, and yet here you are, a lawyer wanting people to follow the law. And so the kids back then, they get, obviously, small town, everybody knew everybody. My senior year, I had a Jeep, a little 1947 Willis Jeep. And my good friend Shane Hall, who became a pastor, went to Oklahoma Baptist University with me, has since passed away. We were doing donuts in a church parking lot. His dad was the preacher. And we were trying to get it up on 2 wheels, which is stupid, but we were. And about that time, JC, which was the chief of police, came down the street, and Shane said, go, run, instead of saying stop. So we took off. And I drove through backyards, over the railroad tracks to evade the police, and pulled into my backyard, only to find the officer was waiting for me. He knew where I lived. And so I got out, and he came out and he said, do I need to have a word with your father? Which is the last thing I wanted. I said, no, sir. He goes, you going to do that again? No, sir. Because everybody knew if they said something to my dad, it was, in the criminal world today, there's no double jeopardy. If you get found innocent, they can't try you again. That's not how it is for Murray McIntyre. If I got spanked at school, I got spanked at home. So I was getting punished for the same crime twice. So everybody knew, unlike today where parents will say, little Johnny would never do that. How dare you accuse little Johnny? No, Dad was taking their word for it, and I was getting in trouble again. So I didn't get any real trouble because, Murray McIntyre was standing there, was the hand of God. And I wasn't going to push that line too much. I made a bomb one time with a friend and rattled some windows. And, you get in a little trouble like that. But it was a different era. You could do stuff like that.
Casually, I made a bomb.
I did. Oh, so it was a great story. So same Shane Hall. We're sitting there one summer, nothing to do. And I had this little canister. And my dad and I would reload shotgun shells. So I had access to all this gunpowder because we do shotgun shells. And I had this canister that was sealed. And we were just talking. I was flipping the lid on and off. And Shane said, that would make a really good bomb. And I said, that's a great idea. And so we got a drill, and we drilled a hole through the top. And for whatever reason, my dad had some cannonball fuse because he had gone to this auction and they'd sold a bunch of stuff, and we had a cannonball fuse. And so we filled this canister full of gunpowder, drilled a hole, and sealed the canister and put the fuse in. But right before we did it, Shane said, we need some shrapnel, which was a horrible idea. So we dumped, BBs and screws and whatever into this thing, and we took it outside and we put up against a telephone pole. I didn't know how big a bomb. I thought maybe like a big firecracker, and we put up against the telephone. But my dad had just built this great big metal building, this Morton building. When that bomb went off, it rattled windows for a couple blocks. The whole side of that building had BB dents because that shrapnel hit it. We were around the corner, didn't get us. And of course, the police came, and we were in the house, so we didn't come out. But if you did that today, you'd have all kinds of federal investigation. Nothing then. My senior in high school, we had a traveling superintendent that rotated between schools, and he was there that day. And he walked in, and I was walking down the hall with a shotgun. And he said, "Where are you going?" I said, I'm going down to my speech class. I'm giving a speech today and a demonstration on how to take a shotgun apart, clean it, and put it back together. He said, "Is it loaded?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "Okay, be careful. If you did that today, you would get arrested." But back, it was a different era. Everybody had guns in their cars because after school, we went dove hunting. We went hunting. So the cars were full of kids, all had guns, all had knives in their pockets. Everybody had a gun. And it was just a different time to grow up. And it was a great time to grow up, a different world. It's a different world today than it was back then.
So at what point did you start to really formulate this moral compass and decide, you know what, I was a kid. I did a lot of kid stuff. I made some bombs, rattled some windows, trespass, whatever those things might be. But I think that I do understand right and wrong at a high level, and I think that that's really important to me. Was there an event that kind of triggered this? Did you have any influences even before you decided that you wanted to be an attorney? At what point did you really start to formulate that sense of moral right and wrong?
I like to tell people, my mom hates it when I say this. I like to say I was a drug baby because she drugged me to church on Sunday. She drugged me to church Sunday night. She drugged me to church Wednesday. And so I was drugged to church all the time. We grew up in a small town in which there were two churches. There was the Presbyterian church, Presbyterian, Catholic, and Baptist. And we went to the Baptist church. And we were there all the time. And it was a very impressionable time in my life. And, people have different beliefs and different religions. Obviously, I'm Christian. And went to Oklahoma Baptist University, married a preacher's daughter. That doesn't get you into heaven, but it certainly doesn't help. It doesn't hurt. And so had that type of an upbringing where a very, Christian mom setting good examples in that type of environment, and you learned right and wrong, and there's a consequence for your action, and there's a higher purpose, and this is you're here a short time, and that there's an eternity. And if you live your life that way and you realize the things you do now are here and now, but there's a longer, bigger picture, and that you have a responsibility to help other people and to be a good person, I think you're brought up differently and you think differently. And so I've met people before that are rich, okay? They're wealthy. They were rich kids. They had a trust fund. I didn't really care for some of them because they grew up with wealth, already thinking they were better than somebody, and that affected how they thought. And I can grow up with anything. I mean, my first job was shoveling cow manure out of the Clanahan's barn for $3.50 an hour. I had a wheelbarrow and a shovel, and that's what I would do all day long when I was 8, 9, 10, whatever it was, for $3.50 an hour. And everybody's house looked pretty much the same. Nobody knew how much any parents made. We're all the same. And so it was later in life that I developed wealth, but by then I'd already developed the basis of who I am, and that didn't change. And so even today, I try to make it. I'm a talker. I'll talk to anybody. It drives my wife crazy. And I'll walk into Brahms, and if there's somebody sitting there at the table themselves, I'll walk over and say hi and just give them a compliment, because you don't know if that's the only compliment they had that day. There's a lot of folks out there that are lonely, and there's a lot of folks that you can be in a room full of 1,000 people and be so alone you can't imagine. I never am, because I'll talk to everybody. I gravitate to this. I've often said my only complaint with the spotlight is just never bright enough. Pointed at me, and I'll run with it. But I'll talk to anybody. But there's people out there that aren't like that, and so I will go out of my way to try to find the person that seems isolated, try to bring them into the conversation. I did that in high school. There was not really a popular and unpopular crowd when there's only 21 kids in your class, and you're together from kindergarten through 12th grade. You all know each other, and so I just try to treat people really, really well and hope that the impression that I've made makes a difference. And that has helped me in my career because I will do kind things, and people know who I am now, and they see me do those kind things. I'm not doing it for them to watch. I don't even know that they're seeing it. And it'll circle back around to me that somebody saw something that I did. And it's just who I am and how I was brought up. Look, you can be kind or you can be unkind. Choose kind. Why not? Why not? Make the world a better place. Leave the world a better place. Make somebody happy. It's not hard. It's not hard to give a compliment. It doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah.
So just do it.
And it can make all the difference to
It
somebody.
does. That might be the only nice thing somebody said to them that day. And the closest thing, I took a drink. That's probably a bad time to do that.
No, all good.
My best example was, and I had a client, her name was Candy Brown, and I had represented her in a car, and she was pretty badly injured. And we ended the case. Everything was fine. And she had a lot going on in her life. She had a marriage that was going south. She had a kid that wasn't well. She had banged up. She lost her job. But I helped her, which is what I do as an attorney, and helped her out. And case has been over about 6 months. And I don't even remember why. I was just at my office one day. I thought, I'll just call and check on Candy because I had her number. I don't even know why. And I don't do that regularly. I always tell clients, just because I'm done being your lawyer for this case doesn't mean I'm done being your lawyer. And I try to develop a relationship with some of these clients. So if they ever need me, they can call me. Don't even know sure why. Prompting the Holy Spirit, call it what you want it. But I picked up the phone and called her and said, hey, Candy, just checking on you. And I could tell she was down talking to me. But she cheered up and she was done. About a year later, she sent me a note. She was contemplating committing suicide that day. Everything was bad. And she was actually sitting at her table. And my phone call came. Now, I can't take credit for this because I didn't know that. I wasn't calling to stop that. I didn't say anything magical. I just called to say, hey, just checking on you, care about you, how you doing? A 10-minute conversation at most, probably closer to 5. But that made all the difference to her that day. And so I tell my kids, look for opportunities to be nice. Nothing may come of it. Something big may come of it. But again, it doesn't cost you anything to be kind. And what I've kind of discovered in my career and why I think I have the friendships I have, and I go to some of these seminars and conferences and people tend to gravitate towards me, is that I think people expect people that have wealth and money to be jerks or to be mean. And I'm not. I'm just not that way because I've had money and I've not had money. I mean, money's not everything. It ranks up there with air. I mean, it's important, obviously, but it's not the be-all, end-all. And you don't get to take it with you, but you can certainly change lives while you're here.
It's one of my favorite stories to tell about you because people know that we have a partnership here through Tyler Media, and people know that we spend some time together, and they see the image. Maybe somebody that's never considered needing an attorney may not really think about the types of people that are advertising in your space.
Right.
And so people will say, hey, what is this guy like? What is that guy like? And I love getting to talk about you because you do have such a powerful brand and such an incredible image. But you make such an impact in this community from your day of giving that you do to the level that you invest in athletes and athletics at not only the University of Oklahoma that you're really well known for, but your alma mater at OBU as well. And just your willingness to go through life looking for ways to positively impact people. We're going to talk more about your career and some of the cases that you've worked and some of the mass scale differences that you've made in people's lives. But like you're saying, a phone call to the right person at the right time, a smile, a handshake. You walk through our halls here at Tyler Media, you've never walked by somebody without at least acknowledging them if they're in a conversation. You gravitate towards people, and therefore people gravitate towards you. I don't know that you see yourself the same way that others see you. I'm speculating, it may feel like people are drawn to you, but they're drawn to you because you are drawn to them, and you draw things out of people that maybe they didn't even know were there. You can be very inspirational, and your energy changes the entire mood of whatever hallways you walk through, whether you have a conversation with that person or not. Thursdays in this building feel differently than any other day of the week.
I mean, it's very kind. It's very kind of you say it. And I don't know that I see myself that way. I think as a general rule, I just try to be smiling, upbeat, and I want to acknowledge people because it feels good to be acknowledged. And I have noticed that often when I meet people that don't know this side of me, it's the larger than life image, and it's a little distracting or intimidating, and I don't want that. And so I'll be the first one to initiate contact and conversation. But I like people. I mean, I like talking to people. I like complimenting people and seeing them light up. And I want to feel like if I had died of my heart situation a year ago, you often wonder who comes to your funeral. You've gone to some funerals and there's nobody there, and you've gone to others and the room's overflowed, and you ask yourself why. What's the difference between this person that nobody came to and this person that the room was full? And it's the kind of impact that person made on others' lives. That's the reason people will fly across the country for a funeral. The person that died doesn't know that they're there. but that person meant something to them. And so, I want to feel like when I leave this world that I've left a better place and I've impacted people's lives. I had a guy call me this last week or shoot me a text. He goes, Noble, he said, I was just golfing in San Diego and your name came up. He said, and then I flew to Corpus Christi and I was golfing and your name came up. He said, are you famous everywhere? And I said, it's not that I'm famous. It's just I have a recognizable name and I try to be kind and impact people so that they enjoy talking about me. So people feel like that's a common bond sometimes. And I'm very fortunate that people, for the most part, have something kind to say back about me. Does it feel different for you guys? I would not have thought that. I would have not. I just do my thing. I walk in and do my thing. And my wife says that, she goes, you walk in and she goes, your personality fills the room because you just kind of take over. Even if there's somebody else in the room that has a big personality too. I said, look, I'm just trying to be nice and leave the world a better place. And I hope I always do.
You work in a space that is obviously highly competitive. How does that persona and that energy that you've learned to bring into a building impact what you're able to do and the impact that you're able to have for your clients?
I've been practicing law for 29 years, almost 30. Just this week, I met a woman at the hospital who on Sunday had woke up. She had 3 children and a fiance, and on Monday she had 1 child. 2 kids and the fiance were killed in a car crash. The other one was badly injured, and she was in the hospital with what we call an internal decapitation. The top 7 vertebrae are crushed, and they're trying to figure out how to reattach her skull so that she can walk again. Life completely changed, okay? My job when I walk into that type of a setting, because there's nothing my words can say that are going to bring back her children or fiance. I can't unwind anything. I also make sure I never say, I understand what you're going through, because I don't. I haven't been through that. I've sat across the table from dozens and dozens of distressed, crying parents whose kids have been killed. And so I understand the impact on them, but I've not felt that myself other than to watch them. So my job is to impart in that moment confidence in me that at least we will do everything we can to have justice, to make sure that what happened to you and your family that you're going through doesn't happen to somebody else. And it's not that money brings anybody back, but sometimes money's the only way that the defendants change their attitude and the way they do business. And so my first thing is, we're not going to get you a bunch of money for your loss. I can't put a value on lost children, but I can get a number that changes behavior so that what that person's feeling doesn't happen again. So that was Monday. Yesterday, and I have seen horrendous photographs from crashes and things. Saw the worst photographs I've ever seen of a 17-year-old girl. And the things I saw yesterday you wouldn't want to see. You can't get it out of your head. And that's just in the first 3 days of this week. And so that is not atypical. And so I try to keep in mind that the people that work for me are seeing that. And they're not as well suited to compartmentalize that as I am. I do a very good job of compartmentalizing that, realizing that the world's not always fun. And bad things happen. And my job is to help people because they come to me at the lowest of their low with no hope. And I'm the voice of the voiceless, because I tell you what, the insurance companies don't care. An insurance company is not a person. It doesn't have a soul. It's a business whose job is to make money. And that mother in the hospital is just a claim number in electronic form on a computer somewhere. And when that case resolves, they'll go to the next one and the next one and the next one. And they will never think again about the fact 3 people died and this mother's badly hurt. But I will. And they need a voice, and they need my voice. And so, I'm the voice of the voiceless. I'm there to help them at their worst of their worst. But the people that work for me are having to see all this stuff too, and they're just not as equipped as I am to handle some of this emotionally. So I have to be, sensitive to that too. And it's hard to do because I live in a profession and work in a profession which empathy is important, but empathy can overwhelm. And you can't be so empathetic that you're paralyzed and just feel horrible, but you can't lack empathy and that you don't understand. And so it's a really fine line, to the point that my oldest daughter, Mackenzie, who is a wonderful young woman, unbelievable speaker, light years ahead of where I was at her age, runner-up for Miss Oklahoma, two-time second runner-up, whatever you call it, runner-up, second runner-up, what's third place?
First runner-up.
First runner, yeah. Miss Oklahoma a couple times. Unbelievably talented, unbelievably beautiful, very, very smart, be a great lawyer. Now, here I've created this firm, McIntyre Law, okay? I don't have any family members. I didn't graduate law school with a dad or a mom that was a lawyer. I had to create my own. And so you start reaching this age at the end of your career, and I'm not there yet, but you don't have anybody to hand it to. I've got people working for me that are important to me, but no daughter. No, I've got 3 daughters. Mackenzie would be unbelievable, probably better than me, and I'm good. But her empathy won't let her do it. She cannot do what I do because she can't see these pictures and go home unaffected. And so, it's a long answer to your question, but my job is, when I meet with these people, to instill confidence that I have their case. I tell them I'm a professional worrier. You don't have to worry about that aspect anymore. You just worry about getting better. And then go be their voice and stand up against a multi-billion-dollar insurance company that just doesn't care. And so that's what I do.
Does it ever get to you?
Not often. The death and destruction and dismemberment of adults doesn't anymore. Simply because you can become so desensitized, just like people that work accident scenes. Children are different. We had a case one time where it was a head-on collision. A truck driver was looking at his phone across the center line, caused a head-on collision. A little 3-year-old girl and 1-year-old boy in the back seat in their car seats. Not a mark on them. Knocked the sock off the little girl. That was it. But both were dead because their necks were broken. That's harder because I'm a parent myself. And I remember bringing my children home and putting them in their crib. And I remember the sense of responsibility I have as a father to make sure they're protected and they're safe. And even now I tell my kids, like I said, Mackenzie, a perfect example. Remarkable young woman. She take on life by herself at this point. And I tell her, I said, look, there was a point in life where my job was I was daddy. I mean, my job is to instruct and train and protect and stand out in front of you. Then there's a point in life where you come up alongside me. Let me teach you some stuff. And then there's a point where, it's your turn to lead and go out and do your life. But at no point can you not, if something horrible's happening in life, my analogy to my kids is I'm like that great big boulder in a mountain stream. Okay, the water's going to go around me. I'm not going to move. So if you ever need to slide back behind your dad and let me fade that heat, I'll be that boulder. I'm right there for you. So I'll lead when I have to. I'll walk beside you when you need me. You go ahead when you can. But when the day finally comes, if it's too much, it isn't too much for me. And so does it ever get to me? Not so much that I'm not going to still be that boulder in the middle of the stream that the water goes around. I'm not going to move. I'm not going to budge. There's no backup.
I love that visual. What do you think it was like for your kids growing up in your household?
Well, I'm a different character with him. I'm fun, and I'm like I said, I hold my daughter down and bite her on the end of the nose. Who does that? And I make up crazy names and call them things. And obviously, there's the serious moments as dad when you're trying to raise the kids. I think poor Mackenzie, there's no manual, and she was such a strong-willed, stubborn little girl, speaking in full sentences at 2, thought she was an adult at 3, arguing like an adult at 3. She probably had harder than the next 2 that came behind. But I also the fun side, I'm dad, and here's the deal. I mean, if my dad ever hears this, I don't know what his thoughts will be, but my dad grew up differently. So he grew up in an era in which you didn't show and say some things. To my knowledge, my grandfather never told my dad he loved him, but my grandfather certainly did because I saw the interaction and the way he treated him. To my knowledge, at 55, I can't tell you a single time my father's ever said the words to me, I love you. Okay, I'm his son. You just don't do that in that era. He does. I know he does, but he's never told me. So when I had daughters, I said, that's just not how it's going to be. And so I was intentional with my kids. I tell them I love them all the time. And so if you ask my daughters about their dad, they're going to say, my dad loves me. Because I'm going to tell them all the time because I was trying to break I wanted to break that cycle in my family, and my brother did the same thing. And I'm not being critical of my father at all. He grew up that way. He treated me in a way in which I knew he did. He just didn't say the words. I say the words, and so I tell them all the time. I love my girls. Like I said, my job is to, and will always be, to be the leader in my home and the protector of all of them. And I don't care that Mackenzie's married now. Yes, she's got a husband, and he's got a role now. But if the day ever comes when they need to drop back a little bit, I'm standing there. I have the resources I can deploy. I can take care of problems, and I can fix stuff. And so that's what I do.
I love the comparison of the way that you interact with your clients and the general public. Because face it, a lot of us don't have great things to say about the general public.
Right.
You do. I've never seen that side of you, right? I'm not exactly a people person.
Right.
I could not do what you do, frankly, because I don't know that I am as empathetic as you would be. But if someone was to touch one of my kids, Papa Bear would come
right
out. And obviously you've got that side of you. But I love that it feels to me like that same type of skill set, that same type of emotion, that same type of response happens, regardless of whether this is an unknown caller number, however many for the day to your firm, or something that one of your kids has called you and needs. And over the year or so that we've gotten to know each other, that's kind of the theme that I keep going back to is you are so charismatic. You are so polished. You are so well educated, well articulate. You seem to always know what to say, and you're always able to have the right story at the right time in often very uncomfortable, bright, spotlit situations, right? But you work in an arena that is extremely bright, extremely heavy. The people that you're representing are at their most vulnerable. It's the worst of the worst day. They don't know where to turn, and they get to lean on your strength almost as a surrogate for them. It's cool to see that you're able to use that same type of response in both your personal life with your girls as well as your law firm. I mean, the stories that you tell us here at the radio station, you could enter one of your children's names or you could enter case number 12. Whether we're talking about the wedding video stuff or we're talking about children that are injured in accidents. It's just really, really neat to know that someone is out there that feels the same way about me as a stranger as I might feel about my kids. And I've got somewhere to call. You know, my dad can't save everything.
Right.
Every parent wants to feel like they can make the impact and save the day for their kids. There's a lot of trouble that I could get in that my dad could not save me from, but I could call Noble McIntyre.
You know, you're right. People come to me often at the lowest of their low, and they have nowhere to go. I have a skill set that is very valuable in those type of settings in that I know what to do. I know where the courtroom is. I know how to affect change. I know how to get what I want. And I've told adjusters I told an adjuster one time in a mediation. He represented Lloyd's of London. And he was used to your typical lawyer who maybe not be well funded or, you know, really needs to get a case settled. That's not my position. I have my money. I can do whatever I want. I'm not worried about trying to finance and fund a case. I have the wealth to do that. And what I told him was, I said, listen, you can't. You think you're this great big multi-billion-dollar insurance company. It's an uneven playing field. And I said, and that's not the case. I said, you can't outspend me. And his response was, well, what do you mean we can't outspend you? We have all this money. You're just one person. I said, yes. I said, but you're running a business. And there's a limit to what your insurance company is going to let you spend in this case. You don't have an open checkbook. I said, and whatever that number is, I can go that high. And I said, so we have a very level playing field. And I said, the difference between me and you is you don't care about your client, and I care about mine. So it's advantage to me. And I said, you know, I take very seriously my responsibility to help people that come to me in that situation, because I know that I have the ability to do that, and I know I can deploy the resources. I had a case come in a couple weeks ago. A young woman was killed, and I told the parents, I said, look, I don't know that we'll ever get any money on this case. I said, I don't know that there's a viable defendant out there, but there's some answers you need to know as a parent that you're not getting. And I said, I'm a parent too. I said, I'll get you those answers. I said, I may never make a dime. I may have to spend thousands of dollars on this case. I said, that's okay. I said, at the end of the day, if I get you information that helps you as a parent understand what happened to your daughter and you sleep better tonight, I said, we'll go do that. And so we'll take cases sometimes for which I know we're not going to get paid. And I can do that because I own the firm. These are my decisions to make, my resources to deploy. And so I just take it very responsible that I have a duty to help folks. And I'm pretty talented at weaving a story and telling a story. One time I was trying to explain to a jury, you know, the emotion of love, how strong the emotion of love is, because I was talking about a parent and what they felt when their young daughter was badly, badly injured, and taking the focus just off of just the child of what the parent was going through. And I said, listen, I said, I knew a young girl who was badly, badly, badly bitten by a dog. It was a little 3-year-old girl, badly bitten. And I said, the rest of her life she was terrified of dogs, obviously so. I mean, she would see a dog and she would literally freeze up, just could not move, could not walk, terrified of this dog. And that was how it was for her whole life, is she'd even see a dog. And I said, but then one day she was at some friend's house, and she walked outside and she rounded the corner, and there's this big, huge, mean Doberman picture. I mean, just mean, growling. And I said, and for once in her life, I said, she wasn't afraid of that dog. I said, you want to know why? I said, because that dog wasn't looking at her. The dog was looking at her 3-year-old daughter. And her only goal in life was to put herself between her then biggest fear and her then biggest love, because love always wins. And so I painted that story and got a really good verdict, and just trying to use analogies and stories to paint an example of an emotion. And I'm fortunately, I'm able to do that with a lot of different examples, and it's worked really well in my career.
What do you think the ripple effect is from your perspective over the other attorneys that work in your firm? Because I'm sure they see the way that you go about your business. I'm sure they see the cases that you take when you know you may not make a dime off of it. Yep. Have you ever thought about the impact that you're having on the community, not just for the people whose cases you are trying, but for the attention of people that work either in your firm or in firms across the street? What is the impact of you on the landscape of law in Oklahoma?
Well, I'll start with my employees. I've changed the life of everybody that works for me, and it's been intentional. So, in fact, when I graduated from law school, I'm a goal person. I set goals, and I set some short-term goals. I was 25 years old. Didn't have anybody, like I said, no parent worked in a law firm. So, some were financial. How am I even going to do this? How am I going to make money? Some were, where am I going to be in a year? Where am I going to be in 2 years? The furthest out goal I set wasn't a goal, it was a milestone. And it was, where am I going to be on September 25th of 2020? Because that was a doubling of my life. I was 25, and that was going to be 50, as far as I could think. And then, what will I have accomplished? I will have accomplished all these goals. It seemed like it was forever out there. On September 25th, 2020, I didn't even tell my work staff I wasn't coming to work. I was on my boat. It was dark. I'd gone out to my lake house by myself, and as the sun came up, I just hit record. And if you go back to that date on Facebook, there's that 8-minute video where I just start talking about those 25 years and how I've gotten there and the people that were there. And the last part of it is, why am I still doing what I'm doing if I don't have to do it anymore? Why am I still looking at horrific pictures like I did this week if I can just be done and sit on a beach? I've got the money to do that. I don't have to work anymore. And so I talk some about that at this stage in my career, my responsibility is mentoring and helping the people that work for me that are all important to me achieve and attain their goals so they can have the same dreams that Noble McIntyre has had. And so, when you talk about what my impact and ripple has been at my office, I have intentionally taken steps to change every one of their lives, to help them make goals. They make great money, to position them in the area in which they can succeed, to draw out of them more than they ever thought was possible. I told Jordan, who's at my firm, she's been with me for 12 years. When I hired her, she was a 2-year lawyer. And I said, Jordan, here's my job. My job, she was 32 at the time. I said, my job is to introduce the 32-year-old Jordan to the 42-year-old Jordan 6 years early. I said, I see in you what you're going to become. You don't believe in yourself yet. You don't believe you can do all these things, but I do. And I said, I want to introduce you to the successful Jordan early so that you can have so much more success and help so many more people as you go. I told my daughters the same thing. My job was to introduce 10-year-old Mackenzie to 20-year-old Mackenzie before she was 20 so that she knew what she was going to come. Same reason I used the slogan, McIntyre rhymes with winning. And the way that started with me talking to my daughters when they were little. And that, McIntyre rhymes with winning. It kind of became a family joke because I would always tell them that. And it wasn't until Mackenzie came home from school, like in 3rd grade, when she said, the teacher says that doesn't rhyme with winning. But my point in that was we want to do things that are out of the ordinary and make the world a better place, even when people aren't looking. We're achievers. Anybody can just sit back. We're achievers. We're doers. We make the world a better place. We're winners. And by being winners, we can help other people. So in my office, I've helped everybody. Had I died a year ago from my heart situation, McIntyre Law would have continued on because I have put into place successes in a succession plan that they would continue. But everybody's life would have been altered because I'm there every day. And I walk by everybody's office every day, and I ask them how they're doing every day. Every one of them comes to my office before they leave at the end of the day and says, love you, boss, I'm leaving. But they don't have to do that, but that's how I treat them. Within the public landscape, it's interesting. Lawyers are territorial. Everybody's fighting for the same case for the most part. I'm not, and because I have the biggest problem in personal injury is case acquisition, and I've solved that. I've built a great brand. My phone rings nonstop. We can take cases and help people, but a lot of people rely on cases just to come in their door, and they don't know where it's going to come from, and they don't have enough to work on. And so it's very territorial. And so often you will find lawyers that are envious of other successful lawyers, and you won't find a lot of lawyers that are friendly with each other. I try not to be that way. I'm a former president of the Oklahoma Trial Lawyers Association. I try to live my life in a way in which I'm approachable. Pepper Devon is one of my biggest competitors. He and I are number 1, number 2 spenders in the market. One of my best friends. When I went down with my heart thing, he called me and said, anything you need, my office will deploy any resource. Because are we competitors? Absolutely. Do we go after the same cases? Absolutely. But the friendship's more important than any of that. I mean, I love that guy and he loves me. And that's just how I am. So how much has a ripple effect in the general community of lawyers? I'm not sure, but in my office, it's been life-changing for everybody that works for me.
You went to OBU. How did you end up there? Obviously raised in the Baptist church. Was it an obvious decision or a hard decision?
I was When I graduated Burns Flat in 1988, I was valedictorian, but I was also something called an academic all-stater. There's only 100 of those in the state, from big schools like Jinx all the way down to some little podunk school. And David Boren, who was a governor at the time, had decided Oklahoma honors athletics with all-staters, but wasn't doing anything for academics. So put into play this program where we're going to take the top 100 seniors in the whole state, smartest kids, and they're going to be the academic all-staters. Tense competition. Hard to think about how many kids graduate in Oklahoma each year. And so I'm out here in Burns Flat, and I become an academic all-stater. And because of that, I could go anywhere. I had full ride offer to OU, OSU. I had intended to go to the Air Force Academy and fly fighter planes. But I suffered a neck injury in a high school football game when I was a sophomore, and what you don't get to do is fly fighter planes if you've had a bad neck injury, which I did. So that altered the trajectory of where I was going to a different direction. Obviously, at the time, it seemed like a horrible deal because I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy and fly fighter planes. And instead, I go to Oklahoma Baptist University and meet my wife, who I never would have met, and had 3 kids that I never would have had, with a career I never would have had what I thought I wanted to happen. This bad thing, bad neck injury, fractured my 3rd and 5th vertebrae, actually God used as a good thing because something completely different happened. I was going to go to OU. I'm a big OU guy. My sister, Kirsten McIntyre, who was an anchor in Fox 25 here in Oklahoma City for years, was worried her brother was going to go from small town to party school and become a partier, and convinced me to come to OBU for just 2 years because I had full rides offered other places. They were going to hold the rides. OBU, I could go 2 years for nothing, half ride. And I thought, I'll go those 2 years and then I'll leave. And I got to OBU, and all of a sudden I'm a big fish in a small pond because I have this huge personality. It's a very small school, 2,000 students, and everybody knew me and I knew everybody, in no time, and absolutely loved it. Whereas I was OU, you can have that personality, but there's going to be people you never cross paths with. And so I just never left OBU. And that's, of course, where I met Rhonda my sophomore year. Our first date was February 2nd, 1990. And the reason that's important is for 9 more days, we were both 19 because I turned 29 days later. So our first date, we were 19. Now I'm 55. She's about to be 55. I told her the other day when I met her, I had no idea I was going to be married to a 55-year-old woman. And she reminded me I'm 55 too. I said, doesn't count. I didn't know I was going to be married to an older woman. So that's how I ended up at OBU. Is my sister, Kirsten, was concerned I was going to go to OU and fall into the party lifestyle. And so I went to OBU and then just stayed.
Did you live in AG?
The police got called for this. So my buddy Shane and I had one of those great big, when a hiker gets hurt in the woods or someone goes down in the airplane in the woods and there's this big canopy of trees and you want the helicopter rescue pilot to know where you are, there's this thing you put in your backpack where it's a helium canister and you twist it and it inflates this great big orange helium balloon which goes up 100 feet in the air above the trees so the helicopter can see it. And my dad had one of those, and I don't know why I had it at school. But we were at school, and the way AG is set up is it's like a U. If you stand out in the middle and you clap your hands, it echoes. And we lived on the first floor on the interior side. And I told Shane, I said, let's go drive a nail out in the middle and let's run the string all the way back to our window and just wait. And I said, at night, let's inflate this thing so this balloon. I said, I had 500 black cat firecrackers. And I said, I'll light them and we'll let this balloon goes. And by the time it hits the apex, it's clear out in the middle of the yard. You won't know who did it. I said, it'll be great. So we waited till it was dark. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning, lifted the window, inflated that balloon, lit the firecracker. And just as it got to the top, firecracker, it sounded like a war because it was echoing. I mean, it sounded like every machine gun you can possibly imagine, which means every cop car you can imagine came. Every light was on in that dorm except mine. And of course, they never caught me. But it was so. Yes, I lived in AG. I don't know why I'm telling this story, but we all the police came out for that one because it echoes out there, and right where it echoes is where all those 500 firecrackers went off at about 100 feet now.
What was law school like? You went to OU.
Went to OU. It was a different era. They were just now starting to come out the computer stuff, so everything was still books, and I lived in my first year. Rhonda went to Tulsa. We didn't get married till halfway through law school. So that first year she wasn't there. It was just me. And, it's a whole different world because in high school you take a test over a chapter. And in college you'll have quarter chapters. At law school you're studying a whole semester over a 500-page textbook and there's only one exam. And it's pass-fail. There's no daily work to make up. And so it's challenging. And so that was the first time that, academically I was highest rated kid in grade school, valedictorian junior high, valedictorian high school, academic honors in college, where I took my first test in law school and called my parents and said, I'm qualified for McDonald's. I'm qualified to work at McDonald's. I don't think I can do anything more than this, because it was such a different load and so much harder than regular college. And so it was a work. It was a chore. I did really well. But I was not the top student in law school. There were those little pointy-headed guys that just studied and studied and studied and had no friends. Yeah, they aced every class, but I wanted to have a life too. I wanted to play intramural sports. I wanted to do some of this stuff. So law school was challenging. I knew that nobody knew who I was, and I knew marketing was a big deal because my dad was in marketing. And the first day I signed a $50,000 SBA loan. Back in the day, it was hard to borrow money. You had to give your blood type, I swear. The same day I signed a $50,000 SBA loan was the same day I signed a $50,000 advertising contract. So I like to tell people, not only did I push all my chips on the table, they weren't even mine. I borrowed them from somebody else. I had to pay them back. And as I was successful, and I thought spending $50,000 in a year on advertising was insane. I mean, I spend $3 million now. But I thought it was insane. So as I was successful, I would just plow it back in. I wasn't giving myself any. I would just enough to live on. I just kept putting it back in, putting it back in, putting it back in. My dad came to me at one point and said, I've been practicing about, 10, 12 years. And that's when Glendale, who was a partner, Glendale Nix, who's now Maples, Nix, and D-Source, he and I split up. McIntyre Law, people think it's been around forever. Wasn't even formed until July of 2009. That's how short a time it's been around, but everybody thinks it's been around as long as Able Law Firm, which has been around 100 years. And it hasn't. It's just that you see it everywhere. He came to me and said, well, what point are you going to put some of this money in your pocket and do some things? I said, Dad, I have a plan. I said, it's like pushing a snowball up a mountain. It's a lot of work. I said, but if you can ever get it to crest and start down on its own, gravity will take it from there. And I said, I'm almost there. And we did hit that momentum stage where now McIntyre Law is self-funding. The cases come in. I give them out to the people that work for me. We resolve cases. We help people. And it just goes and it just works. But it was a battle to get there. There's no such thing as an overnight success. It's a chore, but we got there, and we're successful now, and we can level the playing field against any insurance company because the money's not an issue anymore, and I can deploy whatever resource I want. But it was a long time getting there.
What advice would you give someone in law school right now that's wondering if they can do it and if they could ever get to the level that you're at?
It would be almost impossible for somebody to recreate what I've done simply because we live in a different era. When I came out of law school, the lawyers had only been allowed to advertise for 4 years. It was against the law for lawyers to advertise. It was considered very skeechy, if skeechy is a word, and you were looked down upon if you tried to. Everything was reputational and word of mouth. The problem with that is if you live in Oklahoma City, how's somebody from Burns Flat supposed to know you do what you do? And so people would get lawyers that live in their town that weren't qualified. Well, they passed a law that you could advertise. Well, the only place people advertised was a phone book, okay, because the internet didn't exist. When I graduated law school, it was right when the internet came out and you could put up a website. And none of the big firms that were advertising or that were well known had that yet. And so I was on the cutting edge. It seems strange to say I was on the cutting edge of a website, but I had one of the first good websites that went up to start attracting attention and trying to figure out how to market myself. And so I had that advantage in that I was new to technology, that now somebody coming out, you're already going up against somebody who's got a website that they've spent $1 million on, and they've got all the apps, everything under the sun. So it would be hard to recreate that. What I tell people is, if you come out and you get a great case, the best way to learn, law school doesn't teach you how to do this stuff. You need to affiliate yourself with somebody who's good that's done it. Call me, and don't just refer it to me. There's so many lawyers that refer me a case. I'm happy to take the case and go work it, and I'll pay you a referral fee. That's allowed. But why are you doing that? Don't you want to learn? You should say, I want to co-counsel. I want to go 50-50. Or if you can't afford the expenses, work out something else where I pay all the expenses and you take a little less of the fee. But come work that case alongside me so that you can learn. And here's why that's important. I'm one of only 4 or 5 lawyers in Oklahoma that does mass torts on a national scale. Mass torts are things like Roundup, defective hip, some of these products where there's a large mass of cases, but they're all over the country. In the old days, lawyers only practiced law in their community. All the offices were around the courthouse, just their county. Then people started practicing a couple counties around, then more counties. And now it's not unusual for a lawyer to practice statewide, but it's unusual for somebody to go national, to be outside of their other state, because it's complicated and it's scary and it's hard. And what do you do? How do you know what's going on in Alabama courthouse? You can get local counsel, but it's not easy. The reason I can do it and the reason I know how was the first mass tort project my partner Glenda and I did was when the FinFin litigation came out. And we started getting cases, and we had an opportunity to refer cases to another firm it was really good at. And I called them and said, I don't want to refer it. I want to work with you. Well, they wouldn't work that deal. They just wanted referrals. I said, fine. I'll do the same thing. You pay me the same referral fee, but I still want to come to all the depositions and learn. That's fine. We're not paying any extra. You'll do some depositions. We'll get some free work out of you. So I worked that case for 3 or 4 years alongside a very established law firm with very established lawyers, and I learned. And since then, I can do this stuff. So what I would tell young lawyers coming out is, if you get that great case, don't just refer it to Noble McIntyre or pick the law firm. Work a deal where you work it with me. Let me teach you what I've taught the lawyers that work for me. I've trained everybody that works for me. That's why they're good. Don't just refer it. Let me help you, and I'm happy to do it. And I will always visit with young lawyers and give them advice in that regard.
If you could go back and do anything about building your business over again, is there anything you would change?
Yeah, I think that a lot of employers make the same mistake. They hire quickly and they fire slowly, and you should do it just the opposite. Hire slowly, fire quickly. Not everybody's a good fit. They may be great people in a great spot for another firm, but they may not be a great fit for you, and culture is important. And there have been times where I have hung on to an employee longer than I should have, and it becomes a little toxic, and then it's harder to get rid of them. And there's been times where I hired somebody much too quickly because I didn't search all the background because I needed to fill a role. And I think if I was doing it differently, I could have saved myself about a half a dozen headaches over the years in personnel. So I wouldn't change how I've formed my business. I wouldn't change how the morality behind it or how I run the business. I would change some of the hiring and firing procedures I had over the years because I didn't always do it right. Now I do.
Are there any cases that you feel like haunt you?
Yeah. One of my only losses in my career was 2 years ago. Was my neighbors across the street. Their son was killed by a semi. He was walking on the road in the dark at night, and it was impossible to know what happened because there was video on the semi, but it wasn't functioning that night, they say. I think they deleted it. But I believed enough in that case that I was going to take this case strong. So I'm representing my neighbors across the street, the death of their son, and they moved in when he was 4, and I knew him from 4 to the time he was killed at 19. So I have a very personal invested interest in this thing. And I put on what I thought was an unbelievable case. And in fact, they offered me during trial, they'd offered $500,000 before trial, and we turned it down. They only had $1 million policy. They offered a high-low during trial, which is no matter the outcome, you're going to get something, but you're going to be capped at the policy. And I honestly thought that we were putting on an unbelievable case. We got them in a position where their expert had lied. The defendant had lied twice, and we proved it. I thought we were going to hit a home run. And I told my client to turn down the money that was offered because we were going to hit a home run. The problem with jurors is, as I said before, jurors come in with their own preconceived notions. And we had some, we call them rats, people that are on the jury that lie during jury selection, don't often tell the truth. And they cover up their biases because they want to hurt your case. And we had a couple on those that turned the jury, and I lost that case. And I felt horrible for my clients because I wanted justice for them, and I wanted them to have the economic resources they needed, and I didn't get it. And I mean, I took that loss very, very personally, not because I had $80,000 tied up in the case that I was never going to get back, and not because I had 2 years of work, but because I saw that kid grow up from 4 to 19, and he's dead now, and I feel like I let him and his family down. And so that's the type of case that haunts me.
How do you deal with that? Not only as a lawyer, but as a human.
It's not easy because my life, it's so funny with jurors. Sometimes you'll talk to a jury afterwards and they think, you're just a lawyer. You just want to win this for money. The result of one case or another case does not impact my life at all anymore. I've already got money. What's a little more? If I lose and I lose some money, I've got money. I'm fine. And so it's funny that their mindset is the lawyers are just trying to get rich. I don't need it. I'm trying to help people. And so it's tough when I failed to help somebody and they're my neighbor and they live across the street. And so it's funny. I'll talk to anybody, but it has made it awkward, because my neighbor across the street, every other time you say, hey, I'm going on. But once you feel like you've let them down, you don't really feel like, do they want me to say hi? And I'll give credit to the wife. I mean, she was the first one that she brought over a very nice card and said, you did everything for my family. I mean, we didn't get the result I want. Very, very kind, which broke that ice a little bit. But that's I think one of the ones that would have bothered me the most in terms of an outcome. There are cases that bother me because of the gruesomeness of it, the death of a child and 17-year-old girl, and those are hard. I can't change that. I can just try to get a positive outcome.
Somebody has something horrific happen in their life. They're trying to decide where they can turn, what options they have before they even look up a phone number. What do you want those people to know?
I tell people that hiring an attorney is a very personal decision. These cases can take a number of years, and you better make sure you're comfortable with that lawyer, and you better make sure they care about you, because it's always easy to get a lawyer to talk to you when that lawyer wants you to hire them. But often you never get to talk to them again. You only talk to support staff, or they won't return your call, or you got to call over and over and over and over before. And so what I tell people, even when I go to meet somebody in a hospital with what I think is a great case, there are lawyers that do not want to leave that room without having a contract signed, because there are some lawyers out there that don't play by the rules. The lawyers have been sanctioned because they pay people to go in and lie and say they're with a Christian aid organization to try to run cases. We call it running cases. And if you don't get that case signed up right now, you might not get it. I don't worry about that. I tell folks, look, you're not under any pressure for me to sign it right now. Yeah, I can say all the right things, but often when you're just talking with your family later, you'll think of some things and you can think a little clearer. I said, I would rather you make sure, because if I'm not the right lawyer for everybody. I'm just not. So you need to make sure that you're hiring the attorney that you're most comfortable with, that's most skillful. And the one thing I've noticed about clients is there's a lot of clients that don't ask the right questions. You know, you come in and you hire me on a major case, you don't even ask me if I try cases. You should always ask the lawyer hiring it, how many cases do you actually try? Because a lot of lawyers out there never tried a case. They call themselves a trial lawyer, but they're just a settlement lawyer. If you do try cases, how many? What was your last verdict? You know, ask those questions. You know, what are your results over time? I love those questions because I'm going to stand up and compare with anybody. So I just tell people, look, make sure you're comfortable hiring me, because once you hire me, we're in it together.
Speaking of those questions and staying in that thought process, what sets you guys apart from anybody else that I could call?
I think a lot of things. I think, one, my determination and drive for my firm to be community-oriented and give back to the community. I mean, obviously, everybody sees the big turkey event, but there's a number of things we do that's on a smaller scale that people don't see, where we're helping people. So if you want a lawyer or a firm that cares about people and actually gives back a percentage of what they earn to the community, I think that sets us apart. The other thing that sets us apart is that right now we're the largest advertiser on the Spanish network too, because I have a lawyer that speaks Spanish and 4 or 5 support staff to speak Spanish. So we're able to meet that need as well. Most firms don't have both of those. You although law school is about 50-50 men and women, trial law is not. It's almost universally male dominated. At my office, that's not the way. I have a mother and 3 sisters, a wife and 3 daughters. I have multiple women that work for me, and I've made it a point to try to give women a chance to succeed, and I've hired mostly women. And most of the lawyers in my firm we got 3 guys and 4 women. And that's by intentional design. I think that sets me apart. I think just that the overall approachability, people can get my cell number. I think that sets us apart. I think everybody there is small town. I grew up in Burns Flat. Jeremy was in Broken Bow. Jordan was at Granite. We're small town Oklahoma. We're not big city trust funds where mommy and daddy had the firm before us. I'm not trying to take a swipe at some of these firms where mommy and daddy had the firm and kids just go out into that. That is what it is. But we grew with the community, and we're still serving it.
You mentioned the turkey drive. How did that get going?
I was in my church foyer on a Sunday right before Thanksgiving, and there was this stack of bright orange pieces of paper. And it caught my attention. It was bright orange. I walked over and picked it up. It was a company called Angel Food Ministries, which is out of business now. And it was everything a family of 4 would need for a Thanksgiving dinner for $40. It didn't have a turkey, a little Guinness hens or whatever it was. But it had the stuffing, and it had the potato box. It was $40. And it was for a family of 4 that, you could put this dinner together. It's not going to be like a huge spread, but it'll feed them. And I remember looking at it thinking, I'm not going hungry. And none of my friends are, but there's some folks that are. I thought, I can help some people. I said, I'm going to buy some of these and give them away. And so that first year, I think I spent $10,000, okay? And they brought it to me in a semi, Angel Food Semi, and we hosted an event, and we gave some away in Oklahoma City and some away in Tulsa. And I realized a couple of things. I realized that the need's bigger than what just I was going to be able to do myself. I mean, I needed more than $10,000 because I was early in my career. It was 15 years ago. Also, the same time McIntyre Law was formed, because I'd split off from my other partner. And I said, bigger need than just me. And I said, and it's one thing to just give people a box of frozen food, but if they're hungry right now, it doesn't help right now. And there were people coming up that hadn't eaten in a couple of days. Some of these folks are in rough shape. So ever since then, we feed you on location hamburgers, hot dogs as well. And that's why we feed so many people that day. But I put it out on our trial lawyer listserv, which is all the Oklahoma trial lawyers, and said, listen, here, I'm going to do this event. Anybody want to help? So I raised the money. And so I had my money and some of their money. So the next year it was bigger, and the next year was bigger. And then we expanded the Tulsa, expanded the Mustang. Now, after 15 years, we've raised and have given away about $1.5 million worth of turkeys and food over those years. We hit $100,000 a year every year from all the lawyers that donate. And it's a big event here in Oklahoma City. OU comes out, brings a Sooner Schooner. My alma mater, OBU, comes out, brings coaches and cheerleaders. The line will wrap around the church, and we help a tremendous number of folks. And so this was our 15th year to do what we call the Annual Day of Kindness, and we've done a lot of good with that.
That's cool. We got to be a part of it for the last couple
Yep.
of years. I came out this year for the first time. It's unbelievable to watch you come in on a helicopter,
Yep.
for starters. You've got smokers and grills, and there's kind of like a pit area set up right in the middle next to a line that is formed that wraps all the way around
Yep.
that massive church that hosts it. You know, you've got TV networks and radio stations set up there on live broadcast and remotes. I mean, it is a spectacle for anybody that just happens to be driving down the road. The Sooner Schooner, like you said, the cheerleaders, dancers. It's a really, really cool event just to witness.
I walk through that line, and I try to talk to everybody. And I'm like a celebrity out there on that day because everybody knows me, and they're all, Mr. McIntyre, Mr. McIntyre, just call me Noble. I get hugged and kissed by more little grandmas. Grandmas will kiss you. They don't care. They don't ask. They'll grab you and kiss you. I've been kissed by more grandmothers, even during COVID, than I ever have in my entire life. But the biggest kick I get out of that is not only we're helping everybody, but every year at least one person that has received a turkey in the past donates. Their situation in their life has changed, and they want to give back, and they want to give back to the program that gave to them. And so every year at least one will have somebody that says, I was able to buy 10 turkeys, and they'll write us a check for 10 turkeys or 5 turkeys. But I needed one 4 years ago. I needed one 3 years ago. And so, it's kind of self-prepared. It's like the pay it forward deal.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm doing it, but other people are catching on too. And you don't know where the goodness from all that stops. You talked about ripples earlier. You're sending out ripples of good being and helping people, and other people are going to take it out and run with it too, and you don't know who you're going to help 3 ripples away that only put in play because you did this here.
What do you think the future is for your firm specifically?
It's a good question. There are, in the defense world, you'll hear about defense firms that last for 100 years. Crow and Dunlap have been, Mr. Crow and Mr. Dunlap have been dead forever. But they have a repeatable business model in that they're hourly workers, and they get clients that stick around for years and years and years and years. In the personal injury world, you rarely get a repeat customer. You don't want a repeat customer. He's been hurt twice. And so you have to have a successful business model where cases will continue to come in. What that means is there are no plaintiff firms that survive the death or retirement of the founder in name. Because what happens is even if you get a type A alpha individual like me who puts together a firm, I hire people like me. But they can only rise so far because I'm right there. I'm still Noble McIntyre. You're not going to be above Noble McIntyre. So when I retire or die or go away, that's all of a sudden historically the chance for these other really strong lawyers to have their time in the sun, their name on the billboard. And so firms split at the death of somebody who owns a firm, and they go start their own firms. And you have lots of plaintiff firms that all came from a couple of different lawyers, really, really good lawyers. Now you got all these other firms, but the firm itself never stays together in name only, in the name and what they tried to do because that guy's gone. My case is different. I've spent $25 million in the last 15 years, $30 million branding McIntyre Law. Okay, if I die tomorrow, Jeremy is a great lawyer. Jordan's a good lawyer, but nobody knows Klinger Law. Nobody knows Thurman Law. They know McIntyre Law. So there's a vested interest in both of them to continue that name and that brand because the community trusts that. What I'm hoping is that McIntyre Law is the very first plaintiff firm that I know of to survive and name my death or my retirement for years and years and years to come following the business model I put together.